I know without much ado, I just want to jump straight in. One of this series of posts that you put on Karuppar Swami, Karuppan Swami, and all of that. And one of the things that I've seen is that particularly this Karuppar Swami is very popular with the Hindu Tamil diaspora, if I may say that.
Yes,
I've seen it in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as in Malaysia and as well as Singapore. So I'll start by asking you to tell us who is this Karuppan Swami, who is this Karuppar Swami, and how does this whole thing connect, and why is he so popular in this?
Sure. I'll just give a little bit of my background first.
Right.
So I'm from Singapore, Hindu from Singapore. I was serving in the military police provost unit, doing counter-terrorism and anti-riot. And then later on, I ran a security agency supplying bouncers and bodyguards.
Right.
And after that, I was spending a decade coaching men, basically helping men get over their fears, get out of their comfort zone, build sustainable habits and stuff like that. So coming to Karuppar Swami worship, as you mentioned, there is a very strong, not only Karuppar Swami worship, there's a Grama Devata worship in a lot of these countries where basically when the British brought coolies over from India, so they brought a lot of South Indians. So especially in Malaysia, Singapore, and the Caribbeans, a lot of them brought in their Kula Devata as well. So before they built shrines, they brought in just like the sand from their village, or they bring a trishul or a sickle, and then they plant it in this ground and started worshipping their Kula Devatas. So originally, it was started by the coolies, the Tamils, the majority Tamils, for whom gods like, let's say, Mariamman, Muneeswaran, Karuppar Swami, they were the Kula Devatas. So that's how actually it spread. And before they built agamic temples and all that, they just worship them in like a brick stone, worship them on rocks. They decorated trees, let's say alamaram, arasamaram, in the shape of the Devata, and they just worship like that. So that's how it spread into the Caribbeans and all these islands as well. So now, if we want to talk about their worship, we have to segue into the village traditions. Basically, how before there was organized religion, right? Before there was like even the Abrahamic religions, how did religion function? Basically, we used to live in villages, and they had shamans, they had the medicine men. So in all traditions, example, even in South Africa, you had the voodoo tradition. Nowadays, they call it voodoo, and it has a negative connotation.
Right. Yes.
Just like how Tantra has a negative connotation because of what the Westerners have portrayed it to be. Even that, it was the same way. In Haiti, right? When these Africans, they brought their traditions. That was how voodoo started. It transformed from voodoo to voodoo. And even there, they had oracle traditions. So Karuppar Swami worship, Muneeswaran worship, all started with oracle tradition. I think you have also, I've mentioned this before, oracle tradition, even in Greece, in ancient Greece, you had the oracles of Delphi.
Right.
You had a lot of oracles in various parts of Greece. And Greece was famous for their intellect, their Olympic games and stuff like that. But all the kings, they would always seek the blessings of the oracle before they go to war, before they make negotiations with other states and things like that. In fact, actually, if you remember the movie 300 based on the Battle of Thermopylae.
Right, 300. Yes. There's also a beautiful book that Stephen Pressfield wrote.
Oh yes, I
yeah,
have
that's a brilliant book also. Yes.
I actually recommended that book to a lot of people.
Correct.
So the oracle there, she was the mouthpiece of their god Apollo. And it was a very rigorous process of actually choosing the oracle. They went through a lot of tests, like how you actually have the test in Nepal for the Kumari. Yes, it was similar. And then people like all far people from Egypt, Afghanistan would come and seek the oracle. So when, as you remember, when the Persian army was trying to invade Greece, Leonidas, the Spartan king, would actually seek the advice of the oracle of Delphi. They call her the Pythia. She will later on also be advising even Alexander the Great.
Right.
So if I remember the word correctly, when Leonidas asked for advice, she actually told him, for you inhabitants of white-weight Sparta, either your great and glorious city will fall, or Sparta will mourn their dead king, from the line of Heracles. And back then, you know, Spartan kings were said to descend from Hercules and Heracles. So in the same way, in the African tradition, they had deities like Papa Legba, Baron Samedi, who descended upon the shamans. The same way we had Chinese traditions. Yeah. We had, they call it Sintua, the folk tradition. You had such oracles as well. And Karuppar Swami worship, Muneeswaran worship started with oracles within these villages. That was how it originally started.
Okay. So one of the things that we've also seen is that when you speak of oracles, what we also know, for example, is that in the Tamil tradition also you have this one, right? I mean, he need not necessarily be an oracle, but the Pujari or Samyar Swami who's there, he will have this. I don't know if this is the same as the what we are saying, but he would say, that Swami Vandirthen Mala kind of a thing. I don't know if you understand the Tamil word. So like, and he would predict certain things for the village. He would predict certain things for the, and yeah, I shouldn't say was, because it's something that is happening even now, right? I mean, that is something that, it's like an annual tradition when, this person would say that, if it is Muneeswaran or if it is Mariamman or some, this deity would use this person as the conduit to, speak about various things, offer predictions, talk about on all of these things. I think that is very similar even today, right? I mean, that's something that continues to happen even now, because we see it even in India in several villages in
yeah, they call it Arulvaku.
Arulvaku.
Yes. So Arulvaku tradition is very ancient, and what you say, it even exists today, even in Singapore, Malaysia, everywhere. In fact, my first guru was actually a Muneeswaran Arulvaku person.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was how I actually learned mostly. I was basically, when I was like 12, 13 years old, so I didn't know much about this tradition. I mean, I went to temples and all that. So that when my parents brought me to see Muneeswaran, like you said, descended upon the person, the Muneeswaran would actually tell me things that only I know about, like what I did in school, what I was doing with my friends, things like that.
1 minute. I think there's getting a feedback here. So yeah.
So my first guru, who actually was an oracle for Muneeswaran, at first I just went there, like how I go to a temple. Certain incidences happened while I was studying that made me realize their power. For example, that time I had this thing called Shani Dasha. When you have in astrology, you have 7.5 years of Shani Bhagavan.
Right.
So that was,
they call it that Shani and all that.
Correct. So I was studying in Sec 3. I was about 15 years old. And my mom was worried about this, that I would not make it, because in Sec 3, before you go to your O-level examinations, there's Sec 3, there's a promotional examinations. I had to pass English and 2 other subjects, and I was not studying at all. So English and Tamil I passed. I actually failed the other subjects, but I was praying to Muneeswaran like mad. And in my exam results, there was actually a computer error that made me pass my science.
Oh.
Yes,
Right.
and my
This, this,
entire
this was this was in Singapore itself, is it?
this was in Singapore,
Right, right, right.
and my entire batch of friends all did not actually go through to Sec 4. Only I was promoted due to a computer error.
But
And
was
then
this predicted as part of an Arulwak or something, or it just happened that you worshipped that you were praying to Muneeswaran and
the Muneeswaran, who was my guru at that time, told me, worship me, I will save you.
mm,
Yes. So I was praying like mad. And then in the next year, during the O-level examinations, when I went to seek advice from the Oracle again, they told me to leave all my other friends in school. They were bad. Obviously, they were bad influences at that time.
right.
So as you know, when you're in school, you are studying for examinations and all that. You will be outside exam hall and you'll be like asking, okay, did you study this question? Did you study that question? I was by myself alone. I listened to what the Oracle told me. So I felt like very lonely. And at that point of time, a scent of cigar smell started surrounding me.
Right, right.
Yeah, which
Okay.
is an offering you give to these Grama Devatas and things like that. And it was so strong that my discipline master could also smell it. He actually asked me to empty my pockets to see whether I was smoking, whether I was carrying cigarettes, because I was underage at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah, so when these kind of experiences happen, it grows your faith and your belief.
Right. Um, and one other thing is that when you speak of Muneeswaran, particularly in Karnataka as well as in many southern states, this Muneeswaran coil is a fairly common kind of thing. You will find it in many places. In fact, even in Bangalore, I think we spoke of this offline as well. Where we used to live earlier, uh, just under this modern flyover that we have very close to that the flyover that connects old airport road to Whitefield. You have a Muneeswaran coil or Muneeswaran temple, and Muneeswaran is worshipped as Shiva in that temple there. And you also have these links to particularly if you go to Tamil Nadu, you have this links to INR, who is in turn linked to Dharmashastra, who is in turn linked to Ayyappa, and this Kala Bhairava and all of those things. So one of the things that I also wanted to ask is, none of the in all of these temples, except so I wanted to check this out, because most of these deities are shown in very very in very colorfully, not in the typical agamic stone kind of vigrahams or murtis and other things. And you have these large deities that there is no temple as such. It's only kind of a,
Shrine.
I can't even call it a shrine in some places. It'll just be kind of what we call in Tamil kotai kind of a thing. It's just a covering, and you have this deity inside, very colorful, with carrying a sickle or an axe. Except in this particular Muneeswaran temple that I'm talking of in Bangalore, where he's typically, he's shown as in that black Vigraham Murti. But otherwise, so in any particular reason why these Vigrahams are all depicted like that, as opposed to the typical, agamic Vigrahams and Murtis?
Okay, so we have to segue into the difference between the Mula Murtis, let's say
Mm-hmm.
Shiva, Devi, Vishnu, and Grama Devatas.
Mm.
So, as I said, this worship of these deities started when people lived in villages and when there were shamans. And at that point of time, okay, for example, a good example to use would be a difference between a Bija mantra and a Shabar mantra.
Shabar mantra.
Yeah, so if let's say Bija mantra, they have a lot of protocols, regulations. You need to get Diksha at a Parambara.
Correct.
You need to follow the Japa method, the direction, the kind of cloth you're wearing. Example, Ganapati, you have to do mantra japa before dawn. That's like his time. Certain Devis, you have to do it in midnight, for example. And they have like Shaba Vimochanam, you have Nyasas, all these protocols. So it's a very
Kilakam and all of those things.
correct.
Yeah.
It is an entire protocol by itself, but it also grants safety, because without a protocol, anything can happen.
Right.
So this Shabad mantras, on the other hand, they are always in local dialects. You have them in Bengali, you have them in Hindi, you have them in Tamil as well. Extremely long mantras. They do not have any of these protocols, but they are considered to be very, very powerful. And the same rishis and the same siddhas who actually gave these bija mantras are the same ones who actually gave these Shabad mantras as well. A lot of Shabad mantras were given by Gorakshanath. In our Tamil traditions, we call him Gorakar, part of the Siddhas.
Gorakar.
Yes, they are the same. They are same being. So the rishis and Siddhas, when they traveled the length and breadth of Bharata Bhumi, they were approached by the villagers. These villagers, they are extremely have hard lives, right? They are doing farming, they are doing hunting, they work long hours. They don't have the time to do this kind of bija mantras, follow certain regulations and all that, but they still needed the help of the deities. And their needs were much less. For example, they wanted protection for their crops, protection of their lives from bandits, from other villagers. They wanted Vamsavriti, they would call it. So, they would want their children
to keep the lineage going and all of that.
Correct. They would want rain for their crops. They would need a god to take care of their sicknesses, for example. So in their kind compassion, the ultimate compassion by these rishis, they gave a form of the Mula Devata in a very restricted, powerful form, specific to these issues that a normal person would face. Now, for example, Devi is all-encompassing. She's in charge of everything. But in the village, example, South Indian villages, Mariamman, she is the queen of the south. She's in charge of rain. She's in charge of smallpox and diseases.
Right, correct. All that Vepala Kapu and all of those things,
And example, we have Periyachi Amman or Pechai Amman. She's in charge of childbirth, looking after children, fertility, and things like that. So when the Grama Devatas are basically a very constricted, restricted, but powerful and fast-acting version for basic necessities. Example, Kala Bhaivar, for example, right? Kala Bhaivar is a Kshetra Palakar. And in Tantra, he's got very, very, there's a lot of secret traditions within Tantra itself for Kala Bhaivar. A restrictive, powerful, protective form of him just for protection of life is Karuppar Swami. Karuppar Swami is nothing other than Amsha, we would call, of Kala Bhairava. And I've actually spoken with other sadhakas, other traditions. I've spoken to people in Kerala Kalikulam. I've spoken to Bhairava sadhakas in Varanasi and many other people. And this was what I already had known at the time, and they confirmed my suspicions. So, and you also mentioned Muneeswaran. So Muneeswaran is actually a Amsha of Shiva. If you have the folk stories of Muneeswaran, you will hear all these stories. Basically, you have Jada Muni, who came from the Jade of Lord Shiva.
Of Lord Shiva.
Yeah,
and
you have correct. Yeah, you have Salange Muni. Yep. Yeah, go on.
No, go on. I was supposed to mention the same thing. So
yeah, so
right.
Basically, Muneeswaran is a protective form, a Amsha of Shivan, just for these protective abilities. Just this, because Shivan is also all-encompassing, but they just needed this part. They're not going to do a person living in the village is normally it's not going to do tapas for moksha or for siddhis. They have certain needs, basic needs. So that was how Grama Devatas came about.